Hello friends, and welcome to Top of the Stack MTG. Today I want to talk about mana bases for Frontier. Now this is a very big topic, being that you can play decks with 3 different colors or 4 different colors or even 5 different colors. There's many great choices for mana, especially in Frontier. So I want to start small and work up to the bigger stuff and break it up over a few videos because I don't want them to get too long, which is something that I have a tendency to do. So in this specific video, we're just going to talk about monocolored decks. I know that sounds a little bit silly because you would think you would just throw in 24 mountains and be done with it. But there are some other options, and I want to talk about them just a little bit. First things first, I'd like to talk about fetch lands. Fetch lands are actually okay in a situation like this, a monocolored deck, if you want to thin your deck. If you feel like you don't want to draw too much mana during the game, then this might be a nice way to get around that. Let's say you're playing a burn deck. You've got 20 mountains in your deck, and you do not want to draw more than 4. Literally, drawing a 5th mountain during a game could mean the difference between winning or losing, because you need those burn spells before you run out of gas. So, one way to try to get around drawing that extra mana is to put fetch lands into your deck instead of mountains. So if you normally run 20 mountains, if you decide to run 16 mountains and 4 fetch lands that can grab a mountain, then you will thin your draw pile, your library. And the way this works is, let's just pretend you've got 16 mountains, 4 fetch lands, and in your opening hand, you draw those 4 fetch lands. The chances of that are tiny, but let's just pretend that it happens, okay? So, turn 1, you play the fetch land, crack it, grab yourself a mountain out of your draw pile, out of your library, and then put it into play. Second turn, play that other fetch land, crack it, pull out of your library another mountain. What you're doing is you're lowering the amount of mountains within your library without having to draw them. Right? And you're not taking card disadvantage. You are using 2 cards to get 1 mountain, but those 2 cards are not both coming out of your hand. One is coming out of your library. So technically it's not card disadvantage. You're playing 1 card to get a mountain. And by the end, after you have, if you were just running 20 mountains and you drew 4 and played them, you'd still have 16 that you could draw. But if you're only running 16 mountains and 4 fetch lands, and you play and crack the 4 fetch lands, there's only 12 mountains in there that are left to be drawn. So your chances of drawing one of those is much lower than if you had the 16 mountains in there to draw. It's a neat way to slightly up your chances of winning by thinning your deck. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of rambly, but it's a neat thing. And if you have the money to be playing fetch lands in a monocolored deck, it's an interesting idea that could work well for you. Good. Another quick thing I want to say about the fetch lands, it'll come up later when it's more relevant, but fetch lands don't just grab basic lands. Fetch lands can grab specific types of lands. In this case, I'm looking at the Bloodstained Mire. It can grab a swamp or a mountain. So it doesn't say basic land card. It says swamp or mountain, and there are a couple dual lands that say swamp or mountain. So literally you can grab some pretty amazing things with these fetch lands. Another just quick point I wanted to make about them, but we'll bring it up later when we're talking about dual colors. Good. So there are a couple other fetch lands that aren't quite as good as the big 5, right? The Bloodstained Mire, the Flooded Strand, the Polluted Delta, the Windswept Heath, and the Wooded Foothills. Those 5 fetch lands are the big fetch lands. And the neatest thing about them is when you crack them and grab the land, it doesn't come in tapped. These are fast. And that's what makes them the king of mana bases. They're fast. There's a couple other choices. Number one is Evolving Wilds. Evolving Wilds works basically like the others. You have to tap it. You have to sacrifice it. You can go ahead and go into your library, grab a mana source. And now this one is a basic land, but you can grab any basic land. Okay? Grab a basic land, but it enters play tapped. Now, because it's slow, it can affect how quickly you can take over the game, right? It's kind of a problem, but not horrible. It's better than not having the mana you need, right? It does fix your mana. It's just slow. Another neat thing about it is that problem of being slow is reflected in the price. These things are cheap, okay? It's kind of a substitute to a fetch land, but slow and very affordable. Okay, so the final one when we're talking about fetches that I could find is Warped Landscape. Warped Landscape is interesting. You tap it, add a colorless mana to your mana pool. So this is the only one. Fetch lands cannot be tapped for mana. You have to crack them. You have to use them. Same thing, I believe, with Wooded Foothills. Let me get back to it here. You have to crack them in order to be able to tap them. That's right. So the only way that you can get mana out of these is to use them. Warped Landscape is not that way. Warped Landscape, you can tap it and get yourself a colorless mana. Then you can spend 2 and tap this and sacrifice it and go look for a basic land card and put it into play tapped, just like the Evolving Wilds. Okay, so that's another option for a fetch land, because it can get you any kind that you're looking for. And in that case, the Evolving Wilds and that one are actually a little more versatile than the fetch lands, although the fetch lands come in untapped, which is unbeatable. So that's nice. Good. Warped Landscape, yes. Now let's go on to the Blights. There are 5 lands that were introduced in Battle for Zendikar called Blight. Blighted Cataract, Blighted Fen, Blighted Gorge, Blighted Steep, and Blighted Woodland. And these specifically give you a power, a text that helps the specific color that they're trying to work with. For instance, Blighted Cataracts says, spend 5 generic and a blue and tap Blighted Cataract and sacrifice it and draw 2 cards. Okay, and that's nice for blue. Blue wants to draw more cards. Actually, all colors want to draw more cards, but blue gets to. So it's neat that you have to use blue and you kind of get a blue power. Now the cataracts, or the blights, are really expensive. It's difficult to sacrifice a land and pay 6. I mean, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to get these 2 cards, and they have not seen a lot of play. Okay, but I did just notice Saffron Olive just made a big video about the Paradox Engine deck, and he actually ran Blighted Cataracts in his main deck. So that's cool. It is possible that these are going to start seeing more play as people realize that they exist. You know, I mean, they're uncommons. They weren't sought after. They weren't. They're not used very much, but they're worth it in some cases. Do not just ignore that they exist. Be aware of them. The blue one gets you extra cards. The black one makes your opponent sacrifice a creature. It's removal. The red one deals 2 damage to target creature or player, just like red wants to do. It's expensive, like I said. You got to spend 4 generic and a red and tap this and sacrifice it to do 2 points of damage. Okay, that's a lot. But if they only have 2 life left, is it worth it? Yeah, so consider it. It's okay. Consider it. The white one, the Blighted Steep, gets you gain 2 life for each creature you control. The forest one, the green one, gets you up to 2 basic land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped. Nice. So it's actually like a fetch land, which is great. You have to spend 3 and a forest and tap this and sacrifice it, but then you can go grab 2 and put them on the battlefield tapped. So they're worth mentioning. Consider these when you're putting together a monocolored deck. There's a couple other cards. We've got... There's a series of 5 that also came out in battle. These are the common lands. We're going to start with Fertile Thicket, okay? Fertile Thicket is not a forest. It just says land. It's not a basic land either. It just says land. But you tap it to add a forest to your mana pool. So instead of adding a colorless mana, it adds a forest, okay? So that's interesting. It's created to give you a forest, and it has an enter the battlefield effect. It has to come in tapped. It's slow, but it has an enter the battlefield effect, which once again kind of helps the color that it was built to be played in. The green one, Fertile Thicket, says, when it enters the battlefield, you may look at the top 5 cards of your library. If you do, reveal up to 1 basic land card from among them, then put that land on top of your library and the rest on the bottom in any order. So it helps you get mana. It helps you ramp a little bit, which green likes to do. And if you're in a situation where you're really looking to ramp, this might be a good choice. These don't see a lot of play, just like the others, but they might come in really handy in a specific situation. The red one that taps for a mountain, that's Looming Spires. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains first strike till the end of the turn. That's awesome. Great for trying to rush in with a bunch of creatures as fast as you can. Is it worth it to play a slow land in a fast deck? I don't know. It's a tough one, you know. But they're common, you know, that's why they're really cheap, and it may be perfect for a specific situation. So do know that they exist, and there's one for every color, and every color is helped by it, very slowly helped by it. Yeah, but they're all right. Consider them. Also, it's important to note that because they have an enter the battlefield effect and they are a permanent, bouncing them can help you more often. If you can flicker them, if you can play a card that says remove a permanent from the battlefield and then put it back on the battlefield under its owner's control, that's kind of interesting with these. Of course, they come in tapped. That's what they say, you know, but they do get that enter the battlefield effect again. So it's just worth saying out loud. Interesting. And I think there's one more that we need to talk about. And this one, okay, so I'm going to talk about all of the colorless options in the last video. Okay, there are many, many lands that produce colorless mana that do specific things, and we're going to go over them, but I didn't want to go over them when we're talking about specific colors. In this case, just the 5 basic monocolors, right? But there's one that I had to bring up that is a colorless land, and that is Hanaware Battlements. The only reason I bring it up is because it really works in red. Mountains kind of love this, and if you're playing some kind of an aggro deck, you will see this thing pop up pretty often when you watch deck techs about it and stuff. So it says tap, add one generic mana to your pool, one colorless, and then you can tap a mountain and tap this, and target creature gains haste until the end of the turn, which is cool. Great for a speed deck, right? Or you can do 3 generic and 2 mountains and tap this for a total of 6 lands. If you both own and control Hanaware Battlement and a creature called Hanaware Garrison, exile them, then meld them to Hanaware the Writhing Township, and that's a 7/4. So it makes a gigantic creature, which is also really cool as a win condition for a red deck. This comes up. It comes up kind of often in mono red decks, so I wanted to bring it up now. I haven't used it very much. It's expensive to get that combination to go, but getting the haste is kind of nice. I don't know if I want to spend 2 to do it. I'm not sure, but people use it and it works. So just be aware of that. Good. So that is all the information I believe that is out there for Frontier monocolored mana bases. So consider these things when you're putting together a deck. And I look forward to making part 2, where we're going to talk about the allied 2-color decks, which is, of course, going to throw us right into the fetch lands. Great. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. Please tell your friends about the channel. That would be awesome. And subscribe if you haven't. And thank you to all of my subscribers. And have a great day.